things had gone according to plan, you would be in the Supreme Court of the state of Louisiana. Those justices didn't want to do it. So they let me use it. I'll be back with y'all in a little bit.
Oh, I thought you were asking a question already there. Yeah. No, thank y'all for being here. I don't have the sign language interpreter today. Okay. No, I didn't either. No, I didn't either. But okay. Thank you all for being here. We'll start by addressing some comments that have been made this week about what I supposedly said or have done regarding the voucher program. For starters, as I have said on numerous occasions, I don't particularly care for the cuts at all that are in the budget today. And in fact, we had a special session before the regular session to try to make sure we didn't have a need to implement those cuts. But when you have the largest budget deficit in the state's history, and you remain in deficit, there's only a couple or three ways to address it. You make cuts, you raise revenue, or you do a combination of the both. And as you all know, I've been proposing a combination of both. But rather than working with me in good faith to solve this budget crisis to fund the programs that we all consider to be critical, we've got a special interest group from out of state that's currently misleading the public about issues such as this voucher program and kids' education in Louisiana. Meanwhile, it should not be lost on anyone that in the budget before the legislature right now, Louisiana's traditional K-12 public schools face a $50 million budget cut that threatens teacher salaries and other things that they do in the classroom. TOPS is struggling to deal with a 66% reduction. And we've got safety net hospitals in Alexandria, Houma, Lake Charles, and Bogalusa that are currently not in the budget. And certainly we're going to do everything we can to put them in the budget and keep them open. But when you've got a large budget deficit, you've got to make adjustments. And keeping exactly with what I've said consistently, it is still my intention and my understanding that as it appears in the budget right now, no student currently receiving a voucher will lose it. It's that simple. And I have consistently said I was not going to end the voucher program, nor would I propose taking away vouchers from students who already receive them. I have been good to that word, and I'm not going against it now. And in fact, earlier this week I sat with the superintendent of education, and he told me that his department is not taking a voucher away from any student currently receiving one, and that we're not cutting the number of students who will receive them. And further, you should understand, I never made a specific directive to cut vouchers. We are cutting across the board because that's what you do when you have a record budget deficit. Now, we cannot and will not keep voucher funding level while traditional K through 12 funding is going to be cut. So in essence, some of the voucher proponents are complaining because they're not getting preferential treatment, that they're having to participate in these budget cuts. But I will tell you it's the right thing to do under the circumstances, and they're a little bit late. I think they should have been here during their special session urging the legislators to raise the revenue that we needed to raise so they wouldn't have to be looking at these cuts. And no one should lose sight of the fact that every year since its inception until this one, the voucher program has actually been over-appropriated, and the per voucher amount grew at 5% a year, while the MFP in most of those years was constant. So I want to be clear, so we've got to keep this foremost in our minds. We are not yet done addressing this budget crisis that we inherited. It was $2 billion for next year. That number is now down to $600 million. So we're making slow and steady progress, but we've got a lot of work to do. So until the legislature works with me to raise the amount of revenue available or identifies additional spending cuts, as I asked for in the first special session, And we'll ask again in the next special session. All levels of state government will continue to face cuts. It's just a function of arithmetic. It's the reality of the situation. So I urge outside groups, instead of disingenuously accusing me of lying about something, which is obviously not the case, to instead focus their attention and efforts on the small group of legislators who are currently visiting cuts on agencies across state government because of their refusal to engage in meaningful alternatives that would obviate the need for those cuts. So we are going to stabilize the budget, and we're going to make sure that all of our students in publicly funded schools can receive the money they need to get a great education. So with that, I will open up for questions.
Governor, if everybody's going to keep their voucher, do you envision the amount being cut?
I like that ringtone. I'm sorry, do I envision what?
If you envision everybody who has a voucher now will keep their voucher, will amounts have to be cut, the average amount of the voucher?
Yes. Assuming that at the end of the day, the voucher program is funded at a reduction, which right now I believe it's in the budget for about $37 million. And the amount per voucher will have to be decreased in order for that is my understanding right now. Although currently, while there was I think if you look at it, there was about a 14 or 15% cut in that line item. But given that there are fewer students in line for a voucher this year, that when you do the math, it comes out to about a 10% reduction currently. And Superintendent White informed me that he believed that he would be able to make it work so that the participating schools would accept that voucher at a reduced amount by about 10%. I'm sorry. No, and that even that number could change, because if we're successful, either because the Revenue Estimating Conference recognizes additional revenue that we could put towards education, or because we have a second special session, or both, then that number could eventually get reduced or eliminated as well.
There's been questions about whether this is legal. You're confident that doing this scenario is legal?
Yes. I mean, because there's appropriation language in there. At the end of the day, every budget is itself a statute and becomes the latest expression of legislative will. And the scheme that created the vouchers had language in there that would grow the amount per voucher every year. Well, let me tell you, on its face, that isn't exactly a fair and equitable allocation of money for education, because in most of the years going back over the last 7 or 8, the MFP has been constant. Any other questions? Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of the building blocks that you're putting in place for the next special session, are you confident that you can, well, I guess 2 questions. One, when do you expect them to get initial recommendations from that study group? And are you expecting those to be very detailed about the tax exemption programs that are going to be targeted? And how do you build support around tax breaks when there are so many interest groups involved in such a short time frame?
Well, first of all, there's some talk that I'm hearing about the REC meeting on May the 12th and recognizing enough additional revenue to obviate the need for the special session. Looking at the tea leaves, there's no basis to really believe that's going to happen. So I think the prudent thing is to prepare for a second special session. We've talked about that before. But nobody would be happier than me if we could adequately fund our priorities without an additional special session. As for the call, I am not going to get ahead of the task force. The task force was created as a result of negotiations between the legislature and myself, specifically to make recommendations around comprehensive reforms related both to the budget and to taxes. and we're going to give them an opportunity to do their work. They are very experienced people. They know the circumstances that we're under, and that we're not going to have a long period of time to deliberate these changes and to develop support for them. So I'm expecting a fairly streamlined set of proposals that get us a down payment on comprehensive tax reform, but that are achievable in the short term. But I'm not going to get ahead of them and tell you what I expect them to do, because then it makes it my plan as opposed to theirs. And I would much rather allow them to do their work independently.
But how do you get support for, when there are so many interest groups involved in these various tax
Mhm.
credit programs, it seems as though you're on a tight
We
timeline
are.
between those recommendations and building enough support in our June special session. Are conversations already happening with key legislators about?
Well, they are, but one of the ways you build support is you let the legislature go through the budget exercise right now. And they are seeing what a $600 million shortfall looks like without other revenue opportunities in the current regular session to address them. And so when you start trying to build support for success, that is an integral component of doing that. And so that is going to play out as well. Yes, ma'am.
There's been some criticism of you this week.
Say it
for
isn't so.
not having a vision
Yeah.
for your entire administration for the next 4 years. What do you have to say to those critics? I mean, you said just a moment ago that you didn't want to get ahead of the tax commission.
Mhm.
Criticism has been, where's the governor's vision? What can you tell us about
Well,
what you want to see happen by the end of your term?
Well, first of all, you know, I spent 2 years running for governor, putting forth a vision that garnered 56% of the vote. My vision hasn't changed, but priority number one has to be about stabilizing the state of Louisiana and dealing with the largest budget deficit in our history. That is the short-term goal, because if we are not successful, very little else that I talked about in the campaign or since are we going to be able to do. And so my comments to many people are the vision hasn't changed, but there are many policy-related issues that are obviously going to be on the back burner until we can deal with the present crisis. There is only so much political capital at one time that can be expended, and I am trying to be as judicious as possible as I move through this process and do that. But I remain very optimistic about the state as a whole and about this administration and what we're going to be able to accomplish. And by the way, when we stabilize this state and continue to have institutions with the ability to afford people more opportunity in Louisiana and to deliver the services that they believe to be critical priorities, that will go a long way to accomplishing the vision that I have, which is creating more opportunity. I've said it all along that the state cannot be in the business of guaranteeing equality of outcomes, but we better be in the business of guaranteeing equality of opportunity. We've been on the wrong road, but stabilizing and putting ourselves in a positive path, I think, is priority number one. Jeremy?
Yeah, Governor, in talking with Neil Abramson, he's talking about projects of capital outlay being delayed, paused, that some construction timelines are extended, non-cash lines have been reduced. Can you tell us what kind of shape you think capital outlay is in? And also, you've already started a couple of reforms. What's next for capital outlay from you?
Well, you know, I've dealt with this in a previous press conference. The capital outlay program was about as broken as the budget for the state of Louisiana. It exceeded the bonding capacity for the state of Louisiana by hundreds of millions of dollars. It was populated with many, many programs that were allocated Priority 5 funding that were never going to come all the way through the process and actually see the light of day. And the bonding capacity of the state is determined in part on the overall revenue, which is decreasing. So it all has a compounding effect. And I believe that in times like this, when you don't have the operational dollars across state agencies and higher education to deliver services and properly staff what they have, the last thing we can do is visit unneeded operational cost demands on those same agencies and universities and community colleges. So consistent with what I've said throughout the campaign, we're going to take more of capital outlay, put it towards transportation infrastructure projects, and put it towards deferred maintenance. And the number of new buildings that we're going to build around the state of Louisiana will be limited. That's not just true with respect to capital outlay. The Act 360 construction project program, I should say, for the community and technical colleges is not technically capital outlay, but it is the same basic arrangement. And we have put on hold 3 projects that the community and technical colleges wanted to go forward with, because they would in fact visit additional operational demands upon the community college system, which doesn't have a state general fund or other revenue stream that's sufficient to support it at present. So the capital outlay system is broken. We went a long way towards reforming it when we presented our proposal to the legislature that took out, I believe, $1 billion worth of projects just to put some transparency in it and some reasonableness to it. And we really need to start that process all over again. But I can tell you, throughout my term as governor, we are going to continue focusing on deferred maintenance and on transportation projects.
Mr. Governor, Mr. Tom Watson.
Yes, sir.
We can't
A
do.
lot of Republican legislators that they think you're playing chicken with tops. I guess first, speak to that, and secondly,
Yeah.
do you have any plans, or are you hearing any plans from the legislators to take care of the TOPS cuts?
I haven't heard of a plan yet. I've heard Chairman Henry say that he was going to find a way to do it. I don't know how to play chicken with TOPS. All I know is we have a huge deficit that now is in the $600 million range. We've got K through 12 funding that's been cut by $50 million. We've got higher education funding cut by $46 million. I've got 4 safety net hospitals that are not open. I've got a Department of Corrections that's going to struggle to house inmates. And I've got a TOPS program that's underfunded by $183 million. It's simple arithmetic. I don't know how to make all of that work without with a $600 million hole. So there's no game of chicken being played. I can assure you of that.
Are raising revenues the only option right now?
Well, that's certainly an option. But raising revenue can take multiple forms. One is you can reduce tax expenditures, which is something that I am very hopeful the task force is going to put as the number 1 or number 2 recommendation that we can pursue in a second special session. But there may be some traditional revenue raising measures that are necessary as well. But I will just tell you that when you have a program that is as costly as TOPS at $300 million, and $240 million of it is state general fund, that the ability to allocate all the state general fund necessary to fully fund the program is extremely difficult when you're short $600 million. You know, there's no chicken being played. It's just simple arithmetic.
It seems to have stalled in Senate Finance.
I'm sorry, what is?
Minimum wage seems to have stalled in Senate Finance. Is there any plans to push
Yeah.
that through, or are we finished?
Oh, I'm never finished. I'm never finished. We are moving forward, and I'm talking to folks in the Senate about moving that bill out of committee. One of the reasons, of course, the obvious reason that it's in Senate Finance to begin with is there was a fiscal notice associated with it because we do have a small number of employees with the state of Louisiana who are actually paid a lower minimum wage. And so I find that to be very problematic. I can't imagine that we should pay anybody less than $8 an hour, and we shouldn't. But we're working to move that bill because it's an important way to address the situation in the state of Louisiana where we have too many families living in poverty, too many children living in poverty. Yes.
Representative Lejay has a bill next week regarding long-term care, managed care.
Mhm.
My understanding is that your administration could pursue the same path without that bill, so I was wondering if you could give us your
Yeah.
take on the bill and also your option.
Yeah, I will tell you, in my estimation, it's premature to pursue the bill. We are having negotiations and discussions with folks, whether they, folks in the AARP, for example, who I've sat and talked to, folks in the nursing home industry, the managed care organizations, trying to figure out what structure would make sense for the state of Louisiana, trying to get all the stakeholders on board. We are not there yet. You know, I think this process has played out over the last couple of years, in fact, and has not produced the level of agreement that the previous administration was looking for, and we're not there yet either. Long-term managed care, a comprehensive model, is something that I aspire to, but we've got to do it in a way that makes sense. And I got to make sure that when we take an insurance company and interpose that insurance company between the state and the provider, that we do it in a way that is responsible and doesn't take too much of the money in profit and overhead and then result in less service being available to the individuals who need it. And I'm not saying that can't be done, but we have to go through the process of looking at the states. And I think the last I saw, there's about 26 states that have moved in this direction. Some of them with a comprehensive model that included nursing homes, some that didn't. And we're trying to learn from their experiences as best we can as well. But we are not there yet.
Do you think it makes sense to do it at the same time that you're expanding Medicare?
I don't think it makes sense to do it before we're ready to do it. And I'm just telling you, we're not ready to do it. Yes.
Governor, one issue that seems to transcend party, whoever's in the governor's office, race within the legislature in this state, is abortion. I think you support two of Representative Hoffman's abortion bills. Why do you think the state, is so deeply concerned about further restricting abortion?
Well, as you know, I am a pro-life individual, have been throughout my life, but particularly as a legislator and ran as such as governor. I believe that is the prevailing sentiment around the state as well. And so where we can take reasonable steps to advance that interest and safeguard life, I think we ought to. And I do know that Representative Hoffman has a couple of bills that I do support in that regard. One is increasing the waiting time from 24 hours to 72 hours. And the other is an attempt to deny public funding for those entities that engage in abortion services. Those are two approaches that I support.
Last question from the media. Last question?
Governor, Reverend Lucas, and we're here from White City Network. And basically, we're here because of the vouchers. Originally, we were told that we were going to cut them out, but as I understand today, that we're going to keep it in, that maybe there's going to be a cut. But we want you to understand that there is a very concern. We have a concern because those families need those vouchers because it is a tremendous blessing to our community. And I want to, first of all, applaud and thank you. You met with us at Bishop Chase, and we had a wonderful time. And we were told we would have a meeting since or afterwards, which I think we're in the making of having. But we want you to know that that is a concern of ours.
Mhm.
It is a concern of our culture, our people, and it is a tremendous blessing. We would certainly like to maybe get with you at a further time or date to further inform you as to what our feelings are concerning, because it's going to affect a lot of kids and a lot of families.
Yeah.
It ties into, Governor, if you don't mind, Pastor Watson from New Orleans, it ties into the press conference we just held, where we have several parents
Yeah.
from this region and New Orleans fighting for the scholarships, fighting for the vouchers. As Pastor Lucas said, when we were introduced to you at Dookie Chase Restaurant while you were campaigning, we did have a Q&A period, and our press Press Network did ask some questions of you, you may or may not remember. But we're here, and we also.
I remember the fried chicken.
I know you wouldn't. So again, like Pastor Lucas, we want to thank you for
Well,
giving us an opportunity to speak.
Okay, well, good, and thank you for doing that. First of all, I have never said that I would zero out funding for vouchers. Never, well, who said it?
We were told.
Okay,
You
was
said
it the
but
people,
you
was
said
it the,
you didn't say it.
well, find where I said that.
No.
And no. You all are down there supporting folks who are calling me a liar. Find where I said that I was going to zero out vouchers. Well, okay. Find where that happened, because you're not going to find it. Okay, so secondly, to the extent that you support the voucher program as a great way to educate kids, understand we have a $600 million budget deficit, and that we are also cutting traditional K through 12 funding by $50 million. When the formula for traditional funding for kids K through 12 has been static almost every year for the last 8 years, while the per voucher cost has gone up by 5% in each of those years, while the voucher program has been over appropriated. So I will tell you that if you're against the cuts to the voucher program, I understand that. You would have been well served to show up in the first special session to ask the legislature to pass more revenue, because with that, we could fund a lot of worthwhile programs better than we're currently funding. I'm committed to a second special session, because I believe it's going to be necessary, to resolve a lot of shortfall that we have around education, but also hospitals, higher education, the TOPS program, you name it. So we have a lot of work to do together. But disingenuously calling people liars and ascribing to them motives that they've never had is not a good way to make progress.
Can we rest it by saying, we're not supporting those liars.
Well,
We're not here supporting liars.
we're
We don't
good.
support liars.
Well, good. Then you came to the right place, and I'm glad you left the other press conference.
We have one more question for you, Doctor.
Yes.
Governor, my name is Thomas Hawk from St. Genevieve School. My question is, when will the chickens start laying the eggs, and how will that help us save money for our...
Well, first of all, it will save money. I don't know how much, and the reason is because between now and then, I believe the state's paying for the eggs that we're eating at the mansion. But I'm paying for the chickens, and so when they start laying, we're going to get about a dozen eggs a day. It'll happen at the end of the summer. I've got my fingers crossed. And so I can tell you that the eggs that are consumed by the first family will all be paid for by me. But I thank you for the question, and I want to thank all of you again for coming up from St. Genevieve and in Lafourche Parish, and welcome you again to the Capitol. Thank you. And you look very familiar to me, young man. Did he say his dad was the Attorney General? No. Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate you. Thank y'all.